Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Hopefully you had a good day for this holiday. But DC gave us some big gifts for this holiday yesterday, because not only did we get that amazing, beautiful new trailer for Zack Snyder's Justice League, aka the Snyder Cut. Check out my breakdown for that. But also we got a brand new episode of Batwoman, which we haven't had in a couple of weeks now. They've been on a bit of a hiatus because we had the Super Bowl last week, so if they aired an episode, nobody would have been watching that because everybody was watching the Super Bowl. But we are back with Batwoman, back to our regularly scheduled program here. And we are here with Batwoman Season 2, Episode 4, titled Fair Skin, Blue Eyes. And this episode, I have to say, was a bit underwhelming. I mean, going into this episode after, weeks without the show, I just wasn't in the mood for Batwoman, really. So that could also be a reason for this. But, it just felt really underwhelming. Not really anything big or impactful happen in this episode, and even though there were parts of it that are important to the main storyline of the season going forward, it did kind of feel kind of fillery, a lot of stuff that happened in this episode was kind of like it didn't really need to happen, and there was stuff here that was interesting to see, but again, wasn't really necessary. But the kind of villain of the week type story that we had going on in this episode, I did really like overall. It was really interesting to see. So anyways, guys, let's go ahead and jump into this and start breaking down this episode of Batwoman. So we start off this episode by seeing the False Face Society is still dispersing the snakebite venom drug throughout Gotham City, and we see that Batwoman actually goes and takes down one of the drug dealers, so she's taking him down. That's pretty cool. And we get a moment in here where it basically sets up the big story for this episode, where Batwoman runs into this kid and he tells her that his brother is missing, and then that sets her off on a mission throughout this whole episode, which we'll talk about in a bit because that's kind of like the big story of this episode, as I said before. But in this episode, we also have Jacob Kane, who now believes that Kate is alive, and he offers $1 billion award for any info on who did this to her, who did that to her plane, where she is right now, and all that good stuff. So he definitely wants his daughter back, and that's basically his big goal in this episode. We do see his character tie into the big story with Batwoman and that missing kid also as well. So again, I'll talk about that later. But let's talk about the Alice-Sophie storyline of this episode. This was the one that is important to the main storyline going forward in the season, but again, not really too much even happened here, because we had Alice who showed up at Sophie's apartment, and she was basically saying oh, we need to work together so that we can find Kate, and it was oh, okay. And then you had the conflict there, the bickering back and forth, all that good stuff. Then Luke shows up, and then Alice is oh, I'm gonna kill you, and then she draws her gun, and then she doesn't, and they end up working together. And basically what they need to do in this episode is find Ocean, and that's all the information they have, is just somebody named Ocean, kind of like how with Sophia, it's just Sophia. There's no last name, it's kind of oh, Beyonce, or, Seal. Something like that. So that's kind of the vibe I was getting here with Ocean, and we don't really find out much about Ocean until the end of the episode, which was actually pretty interesting, and I'm excited to see where that goes here. But again, not really much happens here. You get stuff that you expect, like Alice betraying Sophie, and they do find this lady that was, I think, working with Sophia or one of her henchmen or something, but they take her out super easily, and then not really much goes from there. Alice just decides that she's going to have to go and do this on her own and find Ocean, and that's where we see that she actually finds this message from Ocean that says, drop off the merchandise at 5 p.m. So sounds like she knows who Ocean is, and then she sees a photograph of who I believe is this Ocean character, and then we automatically get a flashback to Alice's time when she was still Beth before she actually was Alice when she was on Sophia's island, and it looks like she had some sort of connection, some sort of relationship with this ocean guy. So maybe they were even in some sort of romantic relationship, because we know that Sophia here is kind of playing mind games. She's very manipulative, so we still don't know for sure if she actually has Kate with her. So it would make sense if Sophia this whole time maybe has even sent Alice on kind of like this wild goose chase, and then like gets her involved with her past love interest or something. I think that could be an interesting storyline to tackle here with that part. But yeah, again, other than that big ending there, which does get me interested with this whole ocean character and his past and how it's connected to Beth, I am interested to see where that goes. But other than that, not really much happened with that storyline in this episode. But now let's talk about the big main storyline in this episode, where of course Batwoman is trying to find Kevin, the missing 15-year-old. And this is where we get some really interesting flashbacks to when Ryan was a kid, and she was growing up in an orphanage, and she loved comic books. So that was really cool to see. And then some strange lady just starts talking to her on the side of the street. And at first she's like, "Hey, I have free candy. I'm the neighborhood candy lady, and I have free candy in my car." And now I remember back to elementary school, I remember them always saying, "You see a van that says free candy, you do not get in." And good job, Ryan. She did not get in when this creepy lady said free candy. But then she said comic books, and she was like, well, I'll take some comic books. So then she hopped in the car. This crazy lady basically kidnapped her and drove away. And, you know, you kind of saw that coming. But I do like how this ties into Ryan's story, because we know that she had some sort of involvement with drugs in the past. And this basically explains why she went down that path, because she got involved with all this stuff. She got kidnapped, and then somehow she got involved with drugs and gangs and stuff. So I think that's an interesting explanation there. And then this is where Ryan starts thinking that maybe this same exact thing happened to this kid. And I was like, oh, that's a really interesting idea. But at the time, I wasn't thinking that it would actually be the same lady, but it actually is. So then we continue on with these flashbacks of Ryan living with the supposed sweet neighborhood candy lady, and she basically has a jar of jelly beans, and there's 60 of them in there, and she's like, "I'm gonna take out one jelly bean every day, and by the time we run out, you're gonna realize that this is the perfect home for you and everything." And obviously she doesn't, and she's basically being held there hostage against her will, which is really messed up. And then we see that there's actually a search party looking for a young girl, and Ryan is thinking that it's her, but then they say that she's white, so it's not Ryan. And really a big theme here with Ryan and the candy lady was that, like, nobody's gonna come looking for you. They don't care about people that look like you. And then and at first I was like, oh great, it's just another political racial thing here in this episode. But then, I mean, it is, but then they make it interesting by saying that that girl they were looking for was actually Beth Kane, who of course is Alice before she became Alice. So this is where I got interested in it, because then we got that stuff there. And then Mary and Ryan go looking through Beth's search party logs, because, you know, if the search party went looking for Beth at this house where the candy lady lived, then they would be able to track her down and find that address. So they're able to do that. Ryan goes and confronts the candy lady, or as I like to call her, Crazy Candy Karen. And turns out this lady, she got some thugs. So they straight up come and like knock her out. They electrocute her just when Ryan thought she could save the day, and she confronts her about Kevin. That's when they all knock her out. But she is so easily able to escape, and then she fights Crazy Candy Karen, and she's all bloody and everything. And then she says something about like he escaped, or like he ran out of jelly beans, and like, wow, this lady is messed up. And then this is where it ties back in to Jacob Kane, where we see that Jacob has gone to get some information, but turns out it's actually a secret ambush. He has been set up by Kevin. That's right, Kevin, the 15-year-old kid that went missing, has actually gotten into drugs and gotten into this gang now, and is trying to get into the False Face Society, which again ties into that big season-long story as well. But then Batwoman shows up, and as Kevin is pressured to kill Jacob and join the False Face Society, Batwoman, of course, eventually convinces him to put the gun down, and then the day is saved. And that's where that storyline ends off. And I thought that overall that was a pretty interesting story. I thought it was cool having that creepy lady doing like, oh, free comic books, get in my car, and then like, oh, you ran out of jelly beans and all that stuff. That was really creepy and messed up, but it was a cool storyline that I actually kind of enjoyed seeing here in this episode. But again, that is where that storyline ends. And then the only other thing that we get in this episode is the final scene, the final cliffhanger, where we see that Ryan's ex-girlfriend shows up back in town, and Ryan has actually invited her back. She invited her over, and then they basically call it a truce, and then they do like a pinky swear bond. And then I don't know. She was like, you're the girl that had my back for all those years. So I don't know. This is interesting to see where this goes in the next episode, because we know that this ex-girlfriend is the one that got her really into the bad stuff, and she was the one that was actually doing all the criminal activity, and then Ryan was kind of like just her getaway driver and everything. So I'm interested to see if this is a bad thing. Like, is she going to be a bad influence on her? I mean, most likely, and I doubt this relationship is going to last very long. And it was kind of like a random thing of her just showing up now, but I don't know, guys. Again, this episode wasn't great. I did kind of like the missing kid storyline. Other than that, the stuff in this episode was kind of meh. But, you know, again, there were parts of it I liked, parts of it I didn't. So, guys, let me know down in the comments below all your thoughts on this episode of Batwoman Episode 4, and all your theories for the future of Batwoman Season 2. So, thanks so much for watching. Please drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and hit the subscribe button so I can keep up to